Tonight, does Keir Starmer face the honeymoon blues if he becomes Prime Minister on Friday? The Labour leader defends his record in bringing his party to the brink of power, even as polls suggest he could be the least popular new Prime Minister ever. I'll speak to the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. I get it, Rishi Sunak acknowledges that voters are frustrated with his party, but doubles down on his warning about Labour tax rises. I'll speak to the Cabinet Office Minister, Steve Baker. Ed Davey urges traditional Conservative voters to take the plunge and switch to his party, but will he be the fall guy in the battle between the two main parties? Going postal, emergency measures put in place after a warning that some voters could be disenfranchised by the late delivery of their ballot paper.
So there it is, the exit poll predicting a big Conservative win, a majority for Boris Johnson.
Well, they've correctly predicted landslides and hung parliaments. Now, with election night just days away, we show you the making of one of its most dramatic moments, the exit poll. All that and more with Harriet Harman and Baroness Kate Fall, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Monday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, this is it. We're here. It's election week. On Thursday, you'll have a chance to vote. And on Friday, either Rishi Sunak or, let's be honest, almost certainly Keir Starmer will travel to the King and then ask to form the next government. Now, it's felt like a long campaign. It's been a bruising campaign. And at points, D-Day, the Titanic Quarter, whether Keir Starmer will work after 6 p.m. on Fridays, it's also felt like a pretty surreal campaign. But it's nearly over. And really, at this point, the chance to change most voters' minds has passed. The debates are done, the manifestos are out, the postal votes are already pouring in. The air war is over, so now it's the turn of the ground war. Who can get their vote out when it really matters on Thursday, the 4th of July? And then, very simply, well, it's time to let democracy take its course. One thing is for sure, it's going to be a historic week. Now, the one thing I want to do straight away is let's take a look, shall we, at where the parties have been focusing their campaigns today. It matters more than ever as we enter the home stretch. So let's look at the Conservatives first, shall we? Right, here is our map of the UK. Rishi Sunak took the Conservative campaign to Staffordshire, where he spoke to staff at a packing and distribution centre. He also visited a distillery in nearby Warwickshire. Meanwhile, Labour's campaign today focused on what could be known as the kind of true blue counties of Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire. You can see where they've got in their sights for wins of the Conservative Party. So for the Lib Dems, Ed Davey was, let's find out. First of all, he kicked off the week by bungee jumping in East Sussex. It's one of those so-called blue wall areas that the party have really been pooling their efforts on today. They were also in Berkshire and in the Cotswolds as well. In Scotland, the SNP's John Swinney was in Aberdeenshire, where he visited a fish market campaign on the party's pledge for the country to rejoin the EU. Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, has been following the campaign trails today.
It's been a safety-first election campaign for Keir Starmer, walking what he hopes to be a fine line towards victory. And his message today, assume nothing, get out the Labour vote.
This is the final mile. These are the last hard yards. Every constituency is a fight and the polls do not predict the future.
You could be heading this week for a big majority, but you could be the most unpopular Labour leader to become Prime Minister, to enter number 10. No, really, does that worry you? Because you could end up with the biggest wedding and then have the shortest honeymoon ever.
4.5 years ago, when I took over as leader of the Labour Party, I got similar questions. And I've got a strategy and we will do it. And that's what we've done under my leadership. We have taken this party, we have changed it, and here we stand on the Monday before the election, ready to change our country for the better.
This leader fighting on, but perhaps the game is now up. Here in another defensive Tory seat.
I will fight for you. I will make sure that your voice is heard.
in Staffordshire, trying to convince factory workers to stick with him, if only to stop a Labour landslide.
I don't take a single place or person for granted, but I don't want Britain to sleepwalk into the danger of what an unchecked Labour government with a supermajority would mean.
Off we go.
All campaign, Rishi Sunak's been playing a defensive wicket against the dual threat of the Reform Party to the right and the Liberal Democrats in the blue wall. Ed Davey in search of an electoral bounce in the Tory marginal of Eastbourne.
I'm going to take the plunge, so take the plunge with me.
After years in the electoral wilderness, on Thursday, Ed Davey needs to pull off his biggest stunt yet and win dozens of seats to get back to being the third biggest party in Westminster and in his sights, disgruntled Tory voters.
We're seeing lifelong Conservatives switch to us. We're trying to get them to take the plunge and many more join them. If they do, we can win.
In Hitchin and Harpenden, it's now a two-way fight, a Tory stronghold turned Labour target. For voters here, it's make your mind up time. The general election on Thursday, what do you think about it all?
I'm really not interested.
Are you going to vote?
No. If I was going to vote, I'd go Reform.
It looks like Starmer will become Prime Minister. What do you think of him?
I think he's a decent, respectable person, which is what we need after a long time of Tory government.
I don't reckon on Labour winning. I hope that they don't, but if they do, I hope that he kind of stops swapping his mind about.
But the polls say otherwise and have done for weeks. Keir Starmer on the cusp of making electoral history. Just days left now to frame the argument and usher in a new political era for this place and beyond. Beth, Rigby, Sky News, Hitchin.
Well, here are all the candidates who are standing in the Hitchin constituency. All of those candidates on your screens right now. Well, we can speak now to Labour's Jonathan Reynolds, the Shadow Business and Trade Secretary. Good to have you on the programme today. Now, before we get into the nuts and bolts of the interview, can we just clear something up? Keir Starmer said in an interview today that he has protected time with his kids every Friday and he won't work past 6 p.m, and that's what he intends to do in office as well. Does he mean he won't work past 6 p.m. every day or just on Fridays?
Well, look, anyone who has worked with Keir could testify to his professionalism, to his ferocious work ethic. But what he said in that interview was he would still keep time for his children on a Friday. It's an important family ritual that they have. And I love that, Sophie. I love the fact that someone in such a prominent position in public life is saying, as a father, childcare is not just an optional extra you bolt on. It's integral to who you are. You've got to make time for that. And I want an economy where everyone, to be honest, has the kind of work they can have a good family life around. I think too many people don't have that. To see that kind of positive role model from someone who could be the country's prime minister is absolutely fantastic. And it's exactly what we need more of, I think.
Look, I totally get, the idea that you can't just pick and choose childcare, that it's important for both parents to be engaged. But I guess the problem that some people might be thinking is, look, can you really be that prescriptive if you're Prime Minister? Can you really kind of say, actually, Friday evenings, that's my family time? There are national crises, calls with international leaders, security briefings. You've got to be flexible if you want to be PM, surely.
Of course. Look, I've worked with Keir very closely. He is always on it. He's always prepared. He always makes time for that. But rather than just focus on that, to be able to say, but my family's important. I'm going to make time for them. I'm going to still be a dad, and that's important to me. It's exactly what I think, particularly men in politics, should be comfortable talking about.
So he's going to be more of a kind of chillaxing David Cameron than, kind of Gordon Brown with his red box into the early hours of the morning. Is that what we should expect if he makes it into number 10?
Look, if you look at Keir's incredible legal career, if you look at the job he's done as leader of the opposition, you can see, I think, that professionalism and work ethic in everything that he does. But I think sometimes in a whole range of occupations, there's this temptation to talk about it, I work every hour, I never see my own family. Well, actually, that doesn't mean you're performing well in the job. You'll do your best work if your family life, your life infrastructure around you is in a good condition. And I want more people being able to say that. And I want that for more people at every level of the British economy.
Now, we're in election week. You've defended the kind of Labour campaign against people who've said it's a bit boring, a bit uninspiring. You've said, we're not pitching you a new Netflix series. But don't you want people to feel, I guess, a bit more excited than they do currently about the prospect of a Labour government?
No, I do think people are excited. I mean, what I said is, we don't think politics is entertainment. We think we've had too much of that. Politics should be about public service, should be about fixing problems. But I also, in that speech last week, went on to say, a country where young people can expect to be able to get on the housing ladder or have some security if they're renting, that is pretty radical from where the UK is right now. A country where people have more secure work, where they know how many hours they're getting next week, that would be quite radical. Having a good faith relationship with our nearest trading partner rather than have the internal politics of what the Conservative Party is doing, dominating that relationship with the EU, that would be quite radical. And I think, we need to see a focus in this country on some of the basics: good work, good wages, a decent place to live. That would be a change. But we are clear that, frankly, one of the things holding the UK back in the last few years has been politics as soap opera, has been frequent changes of Prime Minister and personnel. And I think the British public are in the mood, they're in the market for serious government again, for an end to the chaos. And that will only come through a change to a Labour government on Thursday.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, the polls suggest that you're on for a historic majority. But the paradox is that Keir Starmer could actually be the most unpopular Labour leader to become Prime Minister. I mean, his approval ratings are negative, unlike Tony Blair or David Cameron when they first came into power. I mean, is the truth that this election is more about a rejection of the Conservative Party rather than anyone being that excited or encouraged by the thought of Keir Starmer in number 10?
Well, I would strongly push back on that. And I would say, look, I acknowledge that the Conservative record is very poor. There's frankly nothing working better today than when they came to power in 2010. But anyone who thinks that would mean an automatic transfer of support to the opposition, I'm afraid politics just isn't like that. It's certainly not as easy as that. If Labour hadn't changed in response to the 2019 defeat, there is no way we'd be competitive in this election, no matter what the Conservative Party were doing. And if that is possible, I mean, let's be clear, that would make Keir Starmer, if that happens, only the second Labour leader in 50 years to do it, to go from opposition to government. So it's quite an achievement, and I think can't be diminished. But what I have seen and what I know is that it is Keir Starmer's leadership that has directly contributed to Labour being in a position to contest this election.
So why is the approval rating still so low then, his personal ratings, compared to previous people who've come into power?
There has been a dimension of politics and public life in the last few years. I think people are cynical. I think they too often have seen such poor government, they have stopped believing politics can make things any better. I think that reflects on all political leaders, but I know from what Keir has achieved as leader of the opposition with the Labour Party, that if he is anywhere near as successful, if he becomes Prime Minister, I think people will recognise that a great deal. And I know him personally, and I know he has the skills and attributes required to be a very good Prime Minister, but of course, nothing is decided yet. It's still possible Rishi Sunak could wake up on Friday as the Prime Minister. If people don't vote for change, it won't happen. But if they do vote for change in Keir Starmer, they will get a Prime Minister they can believe in again.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Reynolds there of the Labour Party. Thank you. Right, let's hear from the Conservatives now, shall we? Steve Baker is the Cabinet Office Minister. He joins us now. Good to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
How do you think the campaign's been going for the Conservatives?
Well, obviously, it's been a rough campaign. I think we all accept that. The danger now is a Labour supermajority, and any government needs scrutiny, and that means having good quality Conservative MPs there to hold a government to account.
So if the risk is a Labour supermajority, it feels a bit like you've kind of given up on winning.
Well, we'd love to win, but I think people would guffaw if they looked at the polls and then saw me come on here and say that I thought we were going to win. I think we've reached a position where we know that Labour are most likely to come to power. I'm absolutely convinced that Parliament needs plenty of opposition MPs to function well. We know the select committees to fill, and we need to make sure that there's a danger of a government losing votes. I mean, if Keir Starmer has a majority of 250, and he'll have practically untrammelled power. And by the way, something which I think Jonathan didn't quite get onto, that the Labour Party hasn't realised yet, is since they were last in power, everyone's on WhatsApp now. And I'm afraid with a 250 supermajority, we'll see that nothing but criminology happens, which faction of the Labour Party is going where. And one of the things we've all got to do as politicians is cope with this great acceleration that's happened in public debate, and I don't think the Labour Party's come to terms with
I mean, you know a lot about WhatsApp groups.
I'm afraid I do, yes, I do, and that's why I've taken responsibility, and I proposed to Boris ways to sort that out, but that's probably for another time. Okay. I think that's what's really changed in the last 6 or 7 years, and it's going to require politicians to be constantly positive, consistent, and to show real expertise in what they're doing, and I'm very doubtful the Labour Party will do that.
I mean, you've been very honest there about the Conservative Party's chances of winning the election. According to the polls, they could be on course for the worst ever election result. You know, if that happens, do you blame Rishi Sunak, or do you think that he's, I guess, paying for the sins of his predecessors like Boris Johnson and Liz Truss?
I think there are a great many factors at work. I think if we look at France, without wishing to comment directly on their results, you know, something's going on there, something's going on in the USA. There are a number of factors at work here which I think are much more connected to global events than is generally acknowledged. But what I would say is, from the polls, that those polls aren't really reflective of a nation crying out for socialism. Certainly, I'm finding that the public are telling me that they don't want a Labour government. They want a
Keir
good...
Starmer's not a socialist, though, is he? I mean,
well,
he's pretty centrist. He's following a lot of your policies.
Well, it's very interesting you say that, because when he says he wants to basically bulldoze the green belt and build houses, or they want to use the private sector in healthcare to get waiting lists down, or he pours praise on Margaret Thatcher, it feels to me like he's manoeuvring to the right of Liz Truss. You know, growth is his panacea to get out of our difficulties. And I think time and again, when you look at what he's actually saying, he's deliberately pivoting to the right. Now, this is straight out of the Blairite playbook. First, go to the right for its own sake. Second, relish the criticism from the left of your own party because it further shows your positioning on the centre ground. And third, enjoy the damage it does to the Conservatives. And I think they're doing this time and time again. Could give a long list of examples in the press where it's happening. But it doesn't feel to me very authentic. And what I think we should do as Conservatives is every time the Labour Party moves to a place where we would always have wanted them to be, for example, being willing to use the private sector to shorten waiting lists, how I wish they'd said that in 2010 and been consistent about it. Well, as soon as they go there, we should help them keep going.
At the same time, like, you talk about Keir Starmer, you've spoken about global events. The Conservative Party and Rishi Sunak need to take some responsibility for this campaign as well, though. I mean, whether it's announcing the election in the rain, leaving D-Day early, the betting scandal where you had, you know, some of your own members betting on the day of the election. It's been embarrassing, hasn't it?
Elements of the campaign have been embarrassing. There's no point to denying that, yes. Certainly nobody with inside knowledge should be placing a bet. I mean, they bring shame on themselves by doing it. You know, D-Day, I think, was very unfortunate. The Prime Minister said it was a mistake and has apologised. But yes, it's not been a great campaign. But I think many of us are fighting campaigns in our own areas, which we're very proud of. And certainly the public are saying to me that they would like good quality Conservative government. They're not looking for a Labour government. I think if everybody who wants Conservative government goes out and votes Conservative, many of us will do quite well.
Let's talk about the future of the party, shall we? Because it feels like this is where the debate is going to go with the Conservative Party, the kind of battle for its soul, if you like. What are the lessons that you think should be learned?
The first one is that we need to earn trust. And the only way to earn trust in the social media age with this great acceleration, positive relationships, consistency, professional competence and expertise, and to witness those things all the time. And that's going to require the party to internalise debates which otherwise have spilled out into the public domain. Goodness knows I've sat in this studio often enough, and at times it's been necessary. Why, if I may, why was it necessary? If we hadn't changed the terms of our exit from the EU, we would have fractured the Conservative Party and lost to Jeremy Corbyn. It would have been a disaster. So on a number of these issues, what I've done to try and make sure we didn't go to extremes. But now that we're where we are, it's going to be really important for the coherence of our party to have solid principles practically applied to internalise those disagreements. So the first thing, you know, our party's going to mourn loss, losing power. The second thing that will happen is we'll need to earn the right to be heard. That will be done, as I've just mentioned. And then third, we'll need to set out a really coherent programme for government, which I'm afraid will be able to fix the problems which I think Labour are bound to create.
I mean, you have people like, I guess, Andy Street, for example, the former Conservative Mayor of the West Midlands, saying, look, parties win from the centre. And you have others saying, look at the votes that we're leaking to Reform and to Nigel Farage. I mean, where do you think the Conservative Party should end up?
Well, the Conservative Party stands for nothing unless it stands for freedom. So we should be standing for freedom under the rule of law, but we should always be moderate and temperate. I mean, the Conservative Party's at its best. David Cameron was a great exemplar of it, and Andy Street too. Turning up in a suit, looking moderate, sensible, and doing things which need to be done in a way that's clearly articulated and which people can go with.
So no space for Nigel Farage and the Conservative Party then?
I think I've said that before. A person who has deliberately set out to destroy the Conservative Party cannot subsequently be welcomed into it. I mean, that is what he set out to do with Richard Tice. Unfortunately, his party's attracted a number of people who I would absolutely not allow in the Conservative Party. I'm afraid, Nigel can't have it both ways. If he wants to be a Conservative, he should shut down his party and join ours.
How about, if the election is lost, do you think that Rishi Sunak needs to step down as leader immediately? Do you think he should stay on for a period while there's a contest? What would you say?
Well, I think that we all need to reflect and take stock when the numbers are actually in. That's certainly a question first and foremost for him, and I would want to respect that. I've got a great deal of admiration for Rishi. He's a brilliant man with the highest degree of professional competence in everything he does, which I've seen close up, and he certainly deserves the dignity of making his own decisions in the context of the result.
How about your own ambitions?
Well, my main ambition is to represent Wickham from the government benches with Rishi Sunak.
OK, we've got to be careful. Ofcom rules, can't talk too much about the constituencies.
I beg your pardon, of course. But I would like to be on the government benches with Rishi as Prime Minister, and that would be my main ambition, yes.
But if the ball were to come loose at the back of the scrum, would you rule out running for the leadership?
I wouldn't rule it out, no. But look, we've got to do one thing at a time. I'm widely expected to lose my seat. I think that we're actually neck and neck. The polls don't...
OK, we can't talk about your own seat, as
I beg your pardon.
but you're not ruling out a leadership run, are you?
I would not rule it out.
If the stars aligned.
The reality is that my colleagues have sent for me before the referendum, after the referendum, during COVID and over net zero. And on all 4 occasions, I've led actual MPs to a great degree of success. And I wouldn't mind the chance to do it again.
So you've got the leadership instincts in your mind?
I've got 30 years of leadership experience in the armed forces, in the private sector, in Parliament and in government. And I think people can observe that the things which I do are successes. Whether it's Northern Ireland, when I was a Brexit minister, people thought Euratom would be a disaster. It was no problem by the time I'd finished with it. And I'm afraid I don't wish to seem boastful, but people can see that my record is one of success. It might sometimes be tricky getting through things, but, I do know how to get colleagues through difficult moments and crises through to success. But as I repeat, I really emphasise I have to take things one thing at a time.
Sounds a bit like a pitch to me, though.
Well, you forced me onto the territory, and if you force me onto the territory, I'll give you a straight answer, as I always do. But I am fed up with watching a sequence of people be extreme on one talent or another. Just ideology alone is not enough, nor charisma alone. What we need to do is have somebody who's, as I say, professionally competent, consistent, positive, and can lead people with a degree of track record. So we'll see what happens. But let me be clear, I didn't come on this programme to launch a leadership bid.
I understand. I dragged you there. Thank you very much, Steve Baker. Good to have you on the programme. Well, on your screens now, I should say, are all of the candidates standing in the constituency of Wickham. All the candidates there standing to be the next MP for Wickham. Now, of course, the final run-up to the election is sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening. That's with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be The Sun's chief political correspondent, Jack Adelson, and The New Statesman's associate political editor, Rachel Cunliffe. Right, let's bring in our panel for tonight, shall we? The former deputy leader of the Labour Party, Harriet Harman, and Baroness Kate Fall, who served as the deputy Downing Street chief of staff to David Cameron. Great to have you both on the programme. It sounded a bit like the leadership race to succeed Rishi Sunak has begun. I don't know what you think.
Definitely. And I think, look, that's been a feature of this campaign from the start on the Tories, the sense that they're fighting a core vote campaign, but they're also looking to the next fight, the leadership fight. That's been all the way along. So it was slightly surprising, but not completely surprising to hear that from Steve Baker today. But right now, I think the main thing they're trying to do is, get out the core, whatever core is left, get that out and try and make sure that the messages about, you know, landslide to Labour and on the right, on Farage, is like, be careful of these people, the, you know, nasty comments, racist comments we've seen, and the comments around Putin, be mindful of voting for these people. So,
Harriet, what did you... I mean, it was interesting, wasn't it, to hear Steve Baker there. I mean, firstly, effectively saying that the result of the election is known. People would guffaw, he said, didn't he, if he came on the programme and said it would be anything but. But then also, I mean, it was pretty clearly a pitch.
I mean, I have to pinch myself watching it, because as recently as 2019, the last time the public all had the chance to vote, to actually cast their vote, not to respond to opinion polls, but to cast their vote, they elected 162 more Tory MPs than Labour MPs. And in Scotland, while the SNP got 48 members of Parliament, we only got 1. So we've got an electoral mountain to climb. And that is so many people having to change their minds. And so it is really remarkable we're in the situation we're in. And for him to be talking about the dangers of a supermajority and launching his leadership campaign here in your studio is a remarkable situation. But of course, opinion polls never changed any government. The only thing that changes a government is votes. And because, you know, I'm pathologically nervous, and because opinion polls don't talk to you about the people who haven't yet decided, you know, we can't absolutely take it for granted. And the other thing is, I don't think people like being taken for granted. I think they feel they've been taken for granted for too long. So we're still very much on, if you want change, vote for it. If you want a Labour government, we'll start working straight away on Friday morning, but you've got to elect us on Thursday. Otherwise, it's going to be the same old, and you don't want that. But it's interesting about Steve Baker talking about professionalism and factionalised WhatsApp groups, because that's exactly where the Tories are right now. One of the things that I think's made people so, you know, despairing of them is the merry-go-round of MPs, the different changes of Prime Minister, the changes in Health Secretary, Chancellor, Home Secretary. It's actually been a shambles, and people really want to have some stability and coherence and decency. So it's quite ironic him referencing that's what they'll need to do in the future.
One thing to pick up on, which I agree with Harriet around, there are quite a lot of people still out there who are saying they don't know or they haven't made up their mind. Now, that's not going to change the end result. I'm sure we are going to see Labour win. But I think that's quite an interesting focus of these polls coming into the last week. I suspect there are some shy Tories there who are annoyed and fed up, but think, well, do we really want to see a large Labour landslide? They think that's what they're going to get, and maybe toyed with reform and might be coming back. So I think that's an interesting.
Can I just say something about this large majority thing? And Steve was saying, wouldn't it be terrible if we had a government where actually they could never be beaten in a vote? Well, I was elected in 1982. We didn't get into government until 1997. And I voted assiduously every night in, night out for all those years. Never won a single vote. I mean, that's the nature of a government having a majority. And I hope Keir Starmer does have a big majority, because I think people want stability. They don't want horse trading and revolts and, you know, deals. They want a government that's got a manifesto and has got a big enough majority to actually get on and deliver it.
What about the thought of a Keir Starmer big majority?
So, look, I think that it could be. I don't think any of us actually know, and I like your point of saying we shouldn't take anyone for granted. That's absolutely correct. I mean, what I would say is we haven't, in terms of the sort of popularity point that you brought up before, I think we have seen a slightly charismatic, a lack of charisma in the campaign from both sides, if I'm being totally honest. Not that much policy discussions. So if Keir Starmer wins big, we don't know exactly what he's going to do, and there is a sense of he hasn't sort of clinched a relationship with the population. But who knows? He might gain popularity in office.
Thanks both very much. I know you wanted to come in there. We'll have lots more from you both as the programme goes on. You are watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. As election campaigning enters its final days, we'll be exploring how much the cost of living crisis might sway voters' decisions at the polls. Get the full story first. This election on Sky News.
We have a sensational team lined up for you in our virtual studio.
We're going to bring you all the breaking news.
We're not just going to be focusing on Westminster. We're going to look at the whole picture.
I will be showing you lots of the data, the analysis, breaking it down.
Sky News election coverage will go further. It will work harder.
What is our country going to look like after the election?
Of course, we'll bring the facts. We're also going to have some fun.
Seriously, people, you won't want to tune anywhere else. You get the full story first on Sky News.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Hello, welcome back. Now, for years now, the cost of living crisis has dominated the political landscape, seemingly without any real solution to the problem here. How exactly the candidates battling it out to become the next Prime Minister will tackle the issue and help struggling households could have a major impact on which way people will cast their vote on Thursday. Sky's People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has been following one family to see how they've been hit by the cost of living crisis.
One thing I don't think we've noticed is food prices coming down at all. In fact, I think quite the opposite. We eat according to price rather than enjoyment.
Sarah and Paul Bomer have had a tough 2 years. They've had to find ways to survive the worst cost of living crisis since the 1950s. And now they have another decision to make. Who's going to make life better for them? When I first met them, Rishi Sunak had just become Prime Minister.
I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda.
I'm cold now.
They live in Derbyshire. Paul's registered disabled and Sarah helps to care for him. Autumn is drawing in and their energy bills have doubled.
The direct debit payment of £240 is due on the 27th of May. Next thing I know, just a quick reminder, we'll collect your monthly direct debit payment of £492.96 on the 27th of June. That's 1 month difference.
What did you think when you read that?
I just burst into tears. I was just like, what are we going to do? And we've had to find that money every single month, and we've had to make massive, massive cutbacks.
With the bills going up, do you feel that that's put a lot of strain on you?
You feel like you're having to stand there and keep a smile on your face, and you have to put a mask on for your children.
Fast forward 2 years and the general election is just around the corner. And while inflation's come down, the price of food is still 25% higher than it was when I first met Sarah and Paul.
Nothing's really changed in the last 2 years. We're the same situation.
Sarah grew up in a Conservative voting family. Paul is traditional Labour.
What's your assessment of this government's handling of the economy, and who do you have faith in making improvements to the economy that make your life better?
I'll stick with Labour this time because I don't think it's been as bad under a Conservative government this bad for a long time.
I don't find Keir Starmer as engaging as perhaps I should do, but I really believe in what he stands for. We're looking at 14 years of the current government. Things haven't improved for us. In fact, they've got worse for us. So that's something that we have to take into consideration with this election.
Their politics have very much been shaped by what they've gone through as a family. And in a life that's been full of difficult decisions recently, this election is no different. Nick Martin, Sky News, Derbyshire.
Nick Martin reporting there from Derbyshire. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. As emergency measures are put in place in parts of Scotland to deal with postal vote delays, we'll be analysing how crucial these votes could be in some of the election's tightest battles. Hello, welcome back. Now, emergency measures have been put in place in parts of Scotland after delays meant that some voters have not received their postal ballots ahead of election day. 2 Scottish councils, Edinburgh City Council and Fife Council, have now set up centres where people can go and be reissued with their ballot. SNP leader John Swinney has warned of the damage that these delays could have on election results in Scotland, where more than a quarter of people have applied to vote by post. But Rishi Sunak said today he was not concerned about people being disenfranchised. Sky's Ashna Harinag reports.
It's election week, but also the start of the summer break in Scotland. But many, like the Good family, have got their bags, but no ballot. They applied weeks ago for their postal votes, but they never arrived.
Had enough time to organise it, and it's just never arrived.
So massively disappointed, I suppose.
Yeah, so people who are going on holiday like ourselves, this is the Scottish holiday period, so a lot of people will be in the same position as us, who's not had time to go and pick up packs if their postal vote's not arrived. So we just won't have our say.
Nor will Ben, bound for Barcelona, feeling like he's had his democratic right taken away.
It's very disappointing that it didn't arrive on time. I was looking forward to voting. I feel like this is an important election, especially in Scotland.
And it's people in Scotland who are among the worst affected, as councils struggle with sudden demand and a tight timetable. There's been a particular surge in the number of postal vote applications here because this election falls slap bang in the middle of Scottish school summer holidays. In Edinburgh alone, the number of people choosing a postal vote has risen by 42% since the last general election. Across the UK, there's been a 20% rise. Politics lecturer Scott says these delays could alter the end result. Ironically, he's also not received his vote before his holiday.
There are constituencies, like my parents' constituency, where the MRP polls are suggesting there's a 1% difference potentially of the votes between the presumed winner and the second place. So it could change the outcomes.
Some councils, including here in Edinburgh, have opened emergency centres to try to solve the issue. Those trying to fix it accept there have been failings.
Elections are always a tight tension between making it accessible so people can take part, but also making sure it's safe and secure. We'll apologise to people for any failings we've got, but what we're doing is working to apply the rules and apply the law.
The Electoral Commission says it recognises the pressures on the voting system because of the holiday season and says it'll look into the issue after polling day. By then, it'll be too late for those who feel like this disruption has affected democracy. Ashna Harinag, Sky News in Edinburgh.
Let's bring in Harriet and Kate, shall we? And Harriet, it often happens at elections, doesn't it, where there are concerns about people being disenfranchised, people who want to vote not being able to. How important are these stories?
Well, I don't think Rishi Sunak should have called the election when one part of the United Kingdom was on holiday with all the problems that are there. And he probably just didn't think about it, which is bad. But, it's something like across the country, at least 1 in 5 people are voting by post. So all those ones that have already gone in, they'll all be piling up in the councils. And what happens is that the electoral returning officers call in the agents of each candidate and they open them. Before Thursday, they'll be opening them up. And the agents are there to watch to make sure it's all proper and everything's in order and they're all being opened. And they don't put them in separate piles, so you don't see a great big pile for one party and a smaller pile for another. But the agents peep and look at where the cross is, so that all around the country now there are agents who are seeing the postal votes and are seeing the results. Now, they're not the final result because they're not the results of people who are going to vote on the day, but words start seeping out about what has been seen by the agent when they look at those crosses on the ballot papers.
Yeah. Naughty. It shouldn't really supposed to be, right? But
also,
I guess it happens. Always starts feeding out slightly. And we're in that part of the campaign as well, aren't we, where, I said at the beginning, it's kind of like the air war is almost over, really, but the ground war really matters, kind of getting the vote out. How important is this, I guess, the kind of business end of the campaign?
It's very important. I mean, there is an element of air war still going on. You hear it all now, you know, with the core messages and, you know, getting out the vote. But on the ground, it really is, you know, knocking up the people that said they're going to vote for you, people you're hoping are going to vote for you, and you're relying on sort of activists or helpers or friends to do that. So just a sort of massive turnout. But on the actual day of the election, often the people that are running the campaigns, so sort of Keir Starmer's, his close team, or when I worked for David Cameron, you have to make a decision. Am I going to be part of the get out the vote, or am I going to sit there with a bunch of people and decide what to do if I actually win? So that will be the dilemma that they'll all be having.
Are you obviously not running for this election just after, you know, being in Parliament for so many years? How does it feel? How's it been?
Well, it will feel great if we get elected. It will feel absolutely rubbish if we aren't. And I would have retired earlier, but I thought that in 2015, you know, the party was in such bad shape that I couldn't stand down and leave it in all the instability and get the wrong person selected for Camberwell and Peckham. And now that the party's on a good footing, I feel happy to go, but I shall feel, you know, very thrilled if we're in government. I think it would be miserable to leave seeing everything I stand for, you know, just not being able to have its say in Parliament again.
What are your sort of plans? I mean, would you kind of, you know, help serve the Keir Starmer government in some way, or you think, actually, you know what, I've done my bit, I want to go and do the things that I really enjoy doing? And
well, you know, genuinely, one of the things that is very thrilling at the moment is to see the really talented people from all around the country, and especially the large numbers of women which are set to be elected. It might be we have as many as 250 new women in the House of Commons, will re-elected, and new women. And that's going to make Parliament very different. And I really hope that they'll actually work cross-party. I hope that they will not just, you know, not put the party first always, but actually put women first and be a bit subversive in working together. Because if they do that, because the large numbers of women that's going to be elected, I think they can really make a difference on things like childcare, equal pay, domestic violence. So they need to be a bit subversive and rebellious. I should think they'll all have heart failure in HQ when I say this, because no government, least of all the whips,
that's not a word
they don't want, you know, subversive groups. But at the end of the day, although whips don't like it, actually, the public does like it when people work cross-party. So I think that, you know, whoever's left from the Tory party, and obviously we can't take anything for granted, there will be women there who will be prepared to work across party, and we should reach out to them and make a difference for women as a whole.
I can see you nodding a little bit there as well.
I completely agree. I mean, one of the things that really pained me were some very senior good women who sort of left Parliament after that bruising post-Brexit Parliament. And it's so important that you have strong women's voices in both chambers, but especially in the Commons.
Thanks very much indeed. Lovely to hear from you both. Still to come on the Politics Hub. Sky News goes inside the exit poll bubble. We'll ask our panel about their election night highs and lows.
There was certainly a feel-good factor and spectacle. I felt, there have been glowing reviews all round today, but I felt in the crowd that it had a very saggy middle. I mean, we all get to that point in middle age anyway, don't we? But it did. It got lost and underneath all the spectacle and the guest stars and the strange cover versions of their own songs, and also new and obscure tracks. It all got a bit lost in the middle. They recovered at the end with Fix You, an amazing sing-along, and then they finished on a new single. I don't know who finishes on the new single. No one does that. And Coldplay should be long enough in the tooth to know to finish on a big one like Shiver, for instance. Yeah, it was really moving because the story is that Coldplay were inspired to form a band when they watched Back to the Future, and he got on stage and played Johnny B. Good in the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, I think it was called, in Back to the Future. And Coldplay were inspired to form a band from that. So it was a really special moment for them to bring out their hero, and it was really moving on sight as well, because it's an iconic film for so many people, including me, and to see him there playing the guitar and obviously enjoying it and being in awe of the crowd was special. And Michael Leavis straight afterwards as well.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolution. It's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, after weeks of campaigning, the big day is nearly here. Election day, of course, is on Thursday, and people right across the country will be casting their votes. But at exactly 10 p.m, the polling stations are slammed shut, and at that point, we get our first major indication of who is likely to be entering number 10 to lead the country's next government. Now, for the first time ever, Sky News will be inside the exit poll bubble as the numbers are being crunched. Here's our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, on how it's all going to work.
It's the first big moment of election night, eagerly awaited by political pundits, broadcasters and you at home. The first indication of just how well or badly the main parties have done, of how the political landscape in this country is changing, and crucially, of who will be walking into number 10 the following day as Prime Minister. But after 6 weeks in which we've been, frankly, up to our eyeballs in surveys, what makes this poll, the exit poll, quite so special? Well, exit polls, first off, are very accurate, sometimes down to a margin of only a few seats, and partly that's down to how they're carried out. Commissioned by the broadcasters, Sky News, BBC, ITV News, carried out by Ipsos UK. They have got interviewers at polling stations around the country, 133 of them this year, mainly chosen because of the battlegrounds you've got there, the party competition, and the current and the historic data that's captured at polling stations, along with previous results in those constituencies, helps to build up a picture of any changes in voter behaviour. And that change in the vote share, that and other data is then poured over by statisticians and political scientists in a sealed room in London. Ingredients for one of the most accurate projections of the election results. So, shall we have a look back at how close it's been in the past? Starting with this, 5 years ago, 2019, that, of course, in that election, Boris Johnson's majority was just 6 seats off. And then you can see, look, bit of an upset back in 2015 when the seat numbers suggested a hung parliament, not quite over the line there. But look at this, David Cameron scraping through with a thin majority. Overall, though, it's worth saying, it has been very close historically. I want to just show you 2010. Look at this. That's what the exit poll was suggesting, and just look at the eventual results. Bang on. Now, shall we take a look at how it actually works on the ground? It's finally election day. You know the drill. You head down to your local polling station. Maybe it's a leisure centre, or maybe it's a church. And here we go. But if you're lucky to be at one of those 133 polling stations around the country, there might be something else.
Hello, hi, I'm from Ipsos. If you could replicate how you've just voted inside on there and pop it in the ballot box for me.
Once you have collected all of your ballot papers, what happens to that data?
So the interviewer will sit down on a bench somewhere, get all the papers out of the ballot box and read them through on the phone. And that's how we enter the data into our systems and are able then to process it and send it over to BBC, ITV and Sky News teams to analyse.
Electronically fed?
Yes, through a secure pipeline.
The data comes through to us. We'll model the change in the vote at each of those polling stations, and we'll try and look for patterns in that change.
It's presumably very secret.
Well, our phones are taken away from us. There are security guards, so we don't communicate with the outside world at all. We just talk to each other. And so it's a very strange feeling as people are still going to the polls, already having a sense of what the result will be.
Secure pipelines, sealed rooms, sounds quite mysterious, doesn't it? But as we've just heard, there is a science and a finely honed art to all of this. And this year's exit poll might be one of the most anticipated yet.
Ed Conway there with that exit poll explainer, and we'll have full coverage here on Thursday overnight of the exit poll and, of course, the election results as they come in. That is here on Sky News from 9 p.m. Our coverage will run all the way through Friday as well. It's going to be a historic week. Let's bring in Harriet and Kate, shall we? I was really happy to have you both on the programme because it feels to me like you both kind of been on the front line witnessing a change of government. You know, Harriet, of course, in 1997, I'm thinking of when Tony Blair, of course, won that historic majority. And Kate, you know, I've been kind of doing my revision for Friday by looking back at some of the kind of moments of the sort of change of power or of people winning elections or losing elections, and kind of saw that footage of you there on the street outside Number 11 as David Cameron came and did his first speech as Prime Minister in 2010. Are there any kind of moments that kind of stand out for you from election nights?
Well, both the election nights are I will never forget. I mean, the first thing is you're, of course, not in London. People think you're somehow at their headquarters, but you're actually in the constituency of the future Prime Minister who wants to be. So you know the exit polls are pretty bang on, as we've just seen. And you sit there waiting, sort of compelled and a form of revulsion towards the television because you know your fate is in the hands. So in 2010, I think we felt like we were winning. And of course, it was shown that we were, and that was very exciting, but we weren't sure we'd actually got over the line. In 2015, we didn't actually think we were winning, and we were terribly nervous, almost couldn't bear to watch it. And when the poll came out that we'd, you know, won the biggest party, there was absolutely, I mean, just the most exciting turnaround. So I will never forget that in particular, 2015.
Did you feel that you knew that 97 was coming, Harriet?
Well, I mean, my experience of being involved in election nights is mostly of losing, unfortunately. I was elected in 1982, we lost in 83, we lost in 87, we lost in 2001, we lost in 2005, we lost, sorry, I got my 90s worried. Anyway, muddled up.
You lost a lot, basically.
We lost a lot. OK, so when we came up, because we mostly lose elections in the Labour Party, that's why we don't take anything for granted. And what happened on 1997, as Kate said, all the cameras are in the constituency of the leader of the party who might be going to be Prime Minister at his count. And he had to be, at his count, up north, up in Sedgefield. And they counted it very quickly so that he could get in his car to drive down to London to form a government. And there was a helicopter overhead, and the helicopter was saying, we are following Tony Blair's car. He is driving down the M1 to go to form a government. And the excitement was just unbelievable. But actually, the exit polls now are much more reliable than they used to be. I mean, I remember in 1992, sorry, I have got that one right, in 1992, where they said it was probably going to be a hung parliament. And in fact, so we were all hoping against hope, but in fact, we were badly beaten. But now they get it right.
They're definitely very accurate, aren't they? Thanks both very much. It's been lovely to have you on Politics Hub this evening. Well, that is it from us tonight. I will see you tomorrow at 7, the countdown to the election well and truly beginning. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee, but I'll see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. for more Politics Hub and what could be a historic week.